welcome to ACE class. It fulfills your annual requirement to be trained in suicide prevention or intervention, and gives you a little bit of an idea on what to do when you run up against somebody who's suicidal. Suicide and suicidal ideations are probably something that really has impacted me in my career so far, because the first duty station that I had, we had 8 deaths, and we weren't in combat. We were in garrison, and 6 of those were preventable. 4 of them were suicide. 1 of them was murder-suicide. But, any amount is too much. Every time we lose somebody, it doesn't even matter if if they're wearing this uniform, it's gut-wrenching. There's just a hole. There's just emptiness. It's like, oh, they were just here, and now they're gone. And so ACE training is all about how to ask if somebody is suicidal, and then what to do after that. How to care for them, how to escort them to get the resources they need. And so that's what we're going to talk about today: is ask, care, and escort. And let me just ask you, have any of you had the opportunity to be involved in a situation where somebody is suicidal or have suicidal ideations?
So I was on patrol one night back at HHBN. We got a call about a young lady who was suicidal, and she was manic, who was attacking everyone around her. So me and my partner on that side of the base, we responded. We went to the room where she was at. She was swinging at her friend. She was crying hysterically. So we got everybody back. We went in there. We started talking to her about anything other than what was wrong. Like, we looked around her room. We were just looking around for things to talk about. So we started talking about those things. Once we got her to calm down, we asked her, what's going on? How can we help you? Eventually, we decided that it would be better for her to be escorted to the mental health facility, so we called EMS. We got her in the ambulance, and we escorted her to the mental hospital.
I'm glad that she had you guys as a resource, and I'm sure as MPs, you guys run into that every once in a while, like having to respond to a crisis situation. Yeah, same with being a chaplain. And the thing is, you never know what people are going through. You never know what people are packing with them. So this first slide, be aware of what's in your ruck. Like, it talks about risk factors. Right? It talks about what do people deal with on a day-to-day basis. So you see things up there like financial problems, relationship problems. What else we got up there? Poor social skills, prior attempts at suicide. A lot of those things, though, they're probably stuff that we've been through, right? Like, relationship problems? Yep, been there. Right? Who hasn't been through a relationship problem? Well, it's coming if you haven't. Who's ever had financial problems? Yeah, have dealt with that, right? It can be stressful, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so the flip side to this slide is, what kind of things do we have as protective factors? As you guys look through that list, what stands out to you?
Family, immigrant, and very good friends.
Family? Family, friends?
Beliefs, my power, faith.
How would that help you you get in a stressful situation to where you feel hopeless? Like, how could that be a protective factor?
Ask them for other times.
That's one of mine, by the way. Belief in a higher power. Because when I feel like I have nobody else, I know that I've always got God. And so that's where I turn, and I turn to family and friends as well, like you guys mentioned, family and friends. Yeah, for sure. Belief in a higher power it can be a resource. It can be somebody to turn to when you feel like you don't have anybody. And you kind of see through the conversation here that that's what we're talking about. It's just giving them somebody to be able to talk to. Like the caring part of ask, care, ask for, it's really like you don't have to have the answers. You just have to be somebody that cares enough to be there and say, hey, you're not alone. So let's talk about ask. Oh, actually, we need to talk about warning signs first, because okay, we talked about risk factors. Do you notice that on this slide with warning signs that a lot of the risk factors are there? Relationship problems, financial stress. Like, what do you think changes alcohol and substance abuse? What do you suppose changes it from being a risk factor to all of a sudden a warning sign?
Well, if they drink more than they usually do, like if it's like usually they have like maybe a couple beers on a Friday night to every day they're just getting absolutely drunk.
Okay. So some change in the person.
Yes, sir.
Would you notice it if there was a change, like your buddy that you hang out with has a couple of beers with dinner, right? Goes to, no, I'm just going back and getting trashed because I just gotta get away from life. Yeah, you probably noticed that, right? Now, if you take that and you couple it with, oh, okay, I know that they're going through a hard time right now with the relationship. Maybe they talk about, maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe they got cheated on, or you know. I used to think, I tell you what, before I joined the Army, I used to think all of that stuff was stuff of movies, but man, you see some crazy stuff as a chaplain. I'm sure you guys do too. It's a lot of work, right? But yeah, if you start coupling a couple of these things together, like really quickly, it can be, like it can just make a person feel hopeless. It can make you think that, okay, whatever's on the other side, if I wasn't here, maybe that's better. It can be a very discouraging place to be. You can start thinking that maybe nobody cares. I'm just alone here. I'm all by myself. All right, so that's what we're talking about when we're saying, okay, there's risk factors, which everybody runs into. And then there's warning signs, which is like the big red flag that, hey, something's wrong. And we've got to be able to ask, how do you go from, hey, I noticed that he's drinking a lot more. How do you go from just asking, like, hey, how you doing, to, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself? You said that when you responded to that crisis, with that guy that was in trouble, that you talked about anything that was not even related, right?
Yes, sir.
So how did you transition the conversation? Or did you ever?
So it was me and my partner. We were talking to her. We just started talking about anything else. Like I said, she had some posters in her room, so we started talking about the subject matter on those posters, just to get her mind off of whatever was wrong, so we could get her to calm down. And then once we got her to calm down, she was able to better communicate with us. We started saying, hey, what's going on? How can we help you? Just tell us a story. And then eventually she said, man, well, I broke up with my boyfriend and we were together for 2 years and things along those lines, and she just missed him a lot. And I was like, well, what can we do to help you? Is there anything that you need from us? She was just like, I think I just need to talk to somebody. And so that's when we escorted her to the mental hospital.
There was a couple of things in that story that kind of rang a bell. I'm like, hey, nice work. Because you talked about the warning sign, right? relationship issues that had just become like disproportional. She couldn't even manage it anymore. And you also ask her, okay, what do you need? How can we help? We had the division surgeon in a previous case class, and I remember he said, you know, when you find out somebody's suicidal, it's not anymore the question of like, we're gonna help them or not. It's okay, how are we gonna help them, right? He said it's like a kid that's gonna have a bath. And it's like, okay, are you gonna have a bath with toys? Or are you gonna have a bath with bubbles? You're gonna have a bath either way, right? So, nice work on like, okay, what can we do to help you? Like, what would work for you? So here's ask, right? Ask is the A in ACE. So it's just talking about, okay, how do we transition the conversation? And if it was your buddy, do you think it would be hard to ask? You say yes. You're kind of nodding, yeah? Why would it be hard to ask?
Because you notice a change.
Be loud.
You notice a change in their behavior, and you just kind of don't know how to go forward with it because you don't really know what's wrong. And sometimes they won't be honest. They might be hiding it. You just have to kind of figure out how you can go on their level and have them trust you to tell you what they're doing.
You probably don't want that answer. Like if it's someone you're close to and know, you don't want them to be in that mindset, so you might be afraid to ask it because you don't want to see them yet.
It's because you're kind of hopeful. Like, you're like, oh, I really hope this isn't the case, but, so you would hesitate to ask, do you think? Or it'd be hard to ask?
It'd be hard to ask.
I think it would. You bring up another good point too. What if the answer is yes? Right? Would you feel at all intimidated by, oh my gosh, if they're thinking of killing themselves, what do I do if they say yes? That makes sense. Would you worry about the relationship if you ask? Would any of you guys worry like, man, if I ask, are they, would they be like wary of me after this, or would they not want to be around me? Do you think it hurt the relationship?
Honestly, so I think it could go either way. I mean, because they could either see it as we care about them, or maybe they get a little bit defensive, kind of standoffish afterwards. Or
Probably. Yeah, it probably could be either. And I think it probably has to do with how close you are to the person, too, is just what I'm thinking about. I think it would still be hard to ask either way. I generally, at this point in the conversation, I would say, I'll split you up into pairs and give you about 5 minutes, and you get to try, like, asking. But since we're recording it, we need to continue on and to move. But I think, okay, so if you're talking to each other, like, how would it go? Maybe we should try it. Do I have any volunteers? Do you guys mind?
I'll go say.
All right, Brookson. Who else? Estrada? Okay. Come over here. I give you the scenario. Estrada's been in a committed relationship. Just found out that his girlfriend's cheating on him. Things have changed a little bit in his behaviors, and you've noticed it. How are you going to approach him? And because you're concerned. Go.
Hey, Strata, what's going on, man?
So, man, just going.
Like we're having some problems back home. You doing alright?
Yeah, yes. Living alive.
talk to me, right?
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Alright. That's kinda how I would do that, sir.
It'd be hard to get to asking if he was thinking of killing himself, though. Huh?
Yes, sir.
If you were to, if that was your goal, like if you were worried about him, how could you transition the conversation to try to get a little bit deeper to, like, hey, are you thinking of killing yourself?
Uh, I'd probably ask him, like, obviously, he already told me how he's feeling, like, I'm alive, I'm doing this and that. Probably say something along the lines, well, all right, well, let's keep it that way. You're not thinking about doing anything else, are you? Something along those lines.
He wasn't very forthcoming with any information, though, was he?
Listen, sir.
I think that's really realistic. You know, people don't want to just come out with their stuff, right? Even though you might want help, like, it's my own business, right? I really don't care to share with everybody. So sometimes you have to be really direct. You have to say, what if you transition to say, so what's going on at home? Because it's more of an open-ended question instead of, is everything all right at home? Because that allows him to say, yeah, everything's all right. Whereas if you say, what's going on? Okay, that's open-ended. Like, it demands like more of an explanation of what's going on.
Yes, sir.
Though you did a good job. I'm not trying to pick on you.
It's all right, sir.
Yeah, I think what he did was very realistic. He's like, yeah, I'm good.
And you just gotta be like nice to everyone, because you don't know when it's gonna be the last.
You don't. You absolutely don't.
You don't know when. You just be nice.
Let me tell you a story. You can go back to your spots, but a lot of times you don't see it coming. I had a sergeant at Fort Bliss that came and talked to me every once in a while. He'd come over to the office. And one night he texted me, and he just said, "Are you still here?" And I responded. I was in a counseling session with a couple, and I responded and I said, "Yeah, but I'm with a couple right now. Are you okay?" Because he had talked about suicide before. Like, he just mentioned it here and there. And so I was always kind of worried about him. And he wrote back and he said, "Yeah, I'm okay. Just needed to talk." And I said, "Okay, let me get with you after this couple." And so I was still counseling with the couple, and he texted me back and he said, "Never mind, I'm good. I got it figured out." I'm like, "All right." He says he's good. And it was already around 1700, and I thought, well, I'll just catch up with him tomorrow. And the next morning, he didn't show up to formation. They found him dead in his barracks room. He shot himself. And I thought he was good, And so I know it wasn't my fault, but it still made me feel just really heavy. Like, what could have I done? Yeah, because people, they're not forthcoming with their stuff sometimes. Right? All right, well, if they did say yes, right, yeah, I'm thinking of killing myself. What's the next step? Yeah, care, right? So in our model, the next step is a C, right? So we'll go to that. Really listen and care. What do you see that's kind of a common thread through these steps that it gives you?
Throughout all the steps, we keep reiterating that, like, you're there. even though you might not get it, like we're here, there are all the steps.
What if, like, how many of you are single? What if somebody was talking about they were suicidal because they're going through a divorce? You've never been there, right? Or I don't know, maybe you've been married and you're single now, but if you've never been married, like, you can't say, oh yeah, I get it, right? Because you don't. What if they lost a child? You'd be like, okay, I've never been there, right? Like for me, I got 6 kids. I know how it is to love my kids, but I've never lost one, so I can't say, if somebody lost their child, I can't say I know how you feel. I can say, man, that's gotta be heavy. I want you to know that I'm right there with you.
Number one, it says I may not be able to understand exactly how you feel, but I do care about you. I want to help.
Yeah. I might not know, right? I might not know how you feel, but I'm here. I care about you. I want to help. They show us this little video in the training for this class, and one of these times I'm going to get it's just a little animated clip, which it's a bear and a deer and a fox, and the fox is the one that's going through the hard times. And the fox, like, is walking along and goes down a hole, and it talks about how it's dark and lonely in the hole, and how it's hopeless, and you see the light, up above the fox, and he's just kind of down in this hole. And then you see the bear come walking along, climb down the ladder into the hole, says, man, it's dark down here. He flips on the light. I'm going to be here with you. Right? So the bear's sitting there talking to the fox, and like being there with him in this dark hole. Right? And this deer pokes his head in from up above and says, yeah, that sucks. You need any sandwiches? Right. So this is talking about the difference between sympathy and empathy. So the deer has sympathy, right? He looks at the situation from up above and he says, oh yeah, that's crappy. I don't want to touch that, right? I'm not going to get down in there. Whereas the bear said, okay, yeah, that's dark down in there. They're all by themselves. I'm going in. I'm going to be with them. Just so they have somebody. You might not know the answer, right? But continue to reassure them that there's hope and that you'll be with them soon. Thompson, you haven't said much yet. What's your thoughts about this? Pull your mask up, so you're good.
I mean, yeah, I feel like that's true. Like, if they know that somebody's with them through their troubles, then they'll feel better about the situation, and they'll just feel that somebody's there for them.
You know, especially if you already have a relationship built with the person, it's effective therapy. I worked as a therapist for a few years before I was a chaplain, and you know, I worked in a youth treatment center. I'd say 95% of the kids that were there didn't want to be there, right? Their parents or somebody else had forced them to be there. Maybe they were state ordered to be there, and they didn't want to talk to the therapist, which was me, right? So I spent probably 80% of my time working on just building a relationship, just getting them to talk to me, because they're not going to come out with the deep stuff if they don't trust me, right? And if they've already got a relationship with you, like if you're already the friend, Yeah, just being there with them. You're already 80% of the way there. So when we get to sitting there with them, right? And we already talked about ask. I think ask is the hardest part, to be quite honest. Because people don't want to come out with their stuff, right? Why do you think they would be worried about telling you? And think about the Army too. We have a different type of culture here, right? What kind of stigmas are associated with like behavioral health problems or suicidal ideations?
So in some of the units I've been a part of, if you went to behavioral health and, for instance, got a no weapons profile,
Okay.
you were treated differently, and it was noticeable by everyone around us. Like, you couldn't go to ranges, you couldn't be on patrol, you couldn't even help clean weapons, you couldn't be anywhere near. And so a lot of tasks that we do as MPs involve weapons. So they were kind of regarded as lazy or just trying to get out of stuff, or sometimes they were just treated worse than everyone else in the formation.
Hmm. So it's a real thing.
Oh, it is. It's
Yeah. So it makes sense why people would be hesitant to want to share their stuff. Like, if they're suicidal and they're talking to you, you have a duty to report, right? Because everybody here except myself and Corporal Watts are mandated reporters. Right? If somebody says, yeah, I'm feeling suicidal, you have this duty. It's part of the Army values to have this duty and loyalty to your fellow soldier to find some help. And if you didn't say anything and they did suicide, what do you think the situation would be? Not good. Yeah. So you got this balance of this idea of stigmas, right? They don't want to come out with their stuff because they don't want to look like that lazy person, right? And maybe they weren't lazy. Maybe it was just that they're dealing with some stuff in their life. But all of a sudden they're on profile. They can't work like everybody else anymore because they can't handle a weapon, can't even clean a weapon, can't be on patrol. Yeah, and so there's a stigma that comes with it. Makes a lot of sense to me why they'd be hesitant to say, yeah, this is what I'm going through. Right? So when we're talking about caring, we're definitely, I don't know, we gotta be able to reassure that, listen, it's gonna be okay. And don't make promises as to, oh, everything will be alright, you know. You don't know. You don't know. Oh yeah, this won't affect your career. You can't promise that, right? But even if they got kicked out of the Army, at least they're still alive. You know, they can go on with their life, make something of themselves somewhere else. We can at least take a life. You know? Well, okay, so we've talked about ask. We've talked about how difficult it is to ask. Oh, and by the way, one thing I didn't say, we need to be specific in the way we ask. We need to say, are you thinking of killing yourself? Instead of, are you thinking of something else? Or you want to hurt yourself or something like that? Because people don't want to hurt. I'm convinced that people that are suicidal, it's not because they want to hurt. They're already hurting. They want to get away from the hurt. Somebody in a previous class made a comparison to the Twin Towers. They talked about how you saw people jumping, like in the videos of the Twin Towers, you saw people jumping out of those skyscrapers. Why? Any ideas?
They don't want to be hurt anymore from the fire.
They were on fire. Yeah. The heat that was behind them was so intense and they didn't see any other way out. And so they jumped, knowing that they were going to die, but thinking, whatever's over there has got to be better than the heat that's behind me, right? It's just so intense. I'm going to die either way, right? Whatever's over there has got to be better. So they jumped. Not necessarily because they were suicidal, but they just didn't see any other hope. So when you're there caring, you're providing the hope. So then we got to talk about, okay, well, what do? You talked about in your example, you talked about how you got her to some other resources, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What kind of resources do we have here?
There's your regular behavioral health that you can go to, make appointments, you can walk in, talk about your stuff. There's chaplains.
Okay.
You can talk to your fellow soldier, your NCO if you want to. And then if it gets that bad, you can always go to the ER.
Yeah. And especially if it's a weekend or an evening, sometime that other resources aren't readily available. Because behavioral health closes, right? Chaplain's always available, always on call. So you can always call the chaplain. There's even an on-call duty chaplain, like if you can't get a hold of your chaplain. But let me give you my number, or do you all have my number? Does anybody have it? Let me give it to you. Let me give it to you. I'll give you a couple of resources. Okay, ready? It is 010-4485-3105. Again, that's 010-4485-3105. And you know what? Somebody actually called me who was in the class. It was this weekend. They called me. And they're like, hey, you gave your number out in the ACE class, and I just need some help. And I'm calling. I'm like, cool, it worked. I'm glad. Another resource that we didn't mention was the MFLAC. And my phone's making videos, so I can't get. I'll get you the number afterwards anyway, and I'll post it in the when we post the files for the ACE class. I'll post the MFLAC's number in there as well. But the MFLAC is a military family life counselor. Have you ever met the MFLAC? Okay, so you know how we were talking about different types of resources, right? What would make one type of resource preferable to another? They don't all quite do the same thing, right? Any ideas? I haven't said anything yet. So I'll pick on you. Like, why would you pick one resource over the other?
If it fits their need.
Okay. And you might ask them, like, what's your need? Well, I'm out of meds. I usually do all right, but I haven't taken my meds in a week. Pick a resource. Oh, we need to get you to talk to the chaplain. No, probably not, right? Maybe get them to a medical resource. Whereas, if they're really worried about, listen, I can't talk about this. I'm slated for drill sergeant school. If they find out that I'm having a rough time right now, then I won't get to go to the class, or I can't afford to get put on profile. Think what everybody would think if I was on profile. You say, well, hey, let's go talk to the chaplain. Because the chaplain, I'm a little biased, right? I think the chaplain's a pretty good resource, but I am one. So the chaplain is kind of patterned after like the Catholic confessional, whereas you go to talk to the chaplain and you talk about what you're dealing with. The chaplain legally can't go out and say anything to anybody about what you talked about. Like, it's that serious. It's considered pastoral counseling and privileged communication. So it's totally confidential. Like, you could come in and you could say, listen, I beat my wife last night. I can't go and say anything to anybody. could say, I've got a gun in the car, I'm gonna go kill my commander after I'm done here. Can't say anything to anybody about what you said. I can't call the commander and say, hey, listen, so-and-so was just here, they said. But I could call the commander and say, get out of the building, go, now, you know? There's a difference though, right? I can't share the content of the conversation. So if you're worried about confidentiality, chaplain's a good resource. MFLAC is similarly a good resource in that way, but they do have limits. Because they're a licensed, usually they're a licensed social worker or licensed marriage and family therapist, and so they do have a license to maintain and they are a mandated reporter. So if you're talking about stuff like domestic abuse, homicide, suicide, things like that, then the MFLAC does have to report that. And if you go to the medical, they also have a duty to inform the chain of command. Like, hey, your soldier was here, they're talking about suicide. They have to justify why, why they're suggesting the type of treatment they are. So maybe that gives you an idea as far as like what different resources you have and when you use what type of resource. There's a few other resources as well. Here. I got behind on our slides here. So here's escort. We really already hit on those points, didn't we? So ask our escort. 911 on post is 119 off post if you're calling for emergency help. Here's a couple other resources. You copy that number down if you want. In Korea, it's 0808 555 118. So it's 0808 555 118, and that's the military crisis line. They also have this military crisis line, which is online, and it's an online chat. So it's militarycrisisline.net, which both of those work in Korea. So I think they'd be good resources. What type of questions do you have? Do you have any questions? Okay. So we've talked about the ACE model. We've talked about asking. We've talked about caring for the person. Excuse me. After you've asked and they've said, yes, I'm feeling like killing myself. Okay? And we've talked about escorting them and the different type of resources that we have available to us. So this is the ACE model. I appreciate you guys being part of the class today. I guess we'll end it there.